Thanks for joining me. Today we will be discussing mindfulness-based interventions and looking a little further into long-term uses. Mindfulness is a ubiquitous concept identified in majority of spiritual cultures, although the Western adoption that we see derives from the Eastern Buddhist tradition. Mindfulness transfer and migration from one cultural situation to another means the behavior adopts a new context and takes on a new meaning. The transference of mindfulness meditation has redefined the Eastern philosophy in hope of contemporizing and updating the ancient tradition. The wide adoption of mindfulness meditation and other Buddhist principles and practices in the field correspond with cognitive views of suffering and healing, highlighting the adaptability and the core features of contemporary globalizing cultures. So why is it important? Currently, mindfulness is being integrated as a viable technique used in therapy. Mindfulness-based interventions need to provide more support in the long-term efficacy of their therapy or to readdress how it can incorporate the benefits provided by Buddhist principles and their ethical framework. So let's look further into Eastern mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness, or sati as it's referred to, is an awareness of the present moment. We see this first appeared in the Buddhist text, the Pali Canon, which derives from the Theravada tradition. This is one of the earliest traditions of Buddhism, and then on has been followed by Zen, Vipassana, and other alike. The Buddhist tradition is centered on something called the Four Noble Truths. Adhering to these noble truths through meditation, an individual can reduce suffering, or better known as dukkha. Mindfulness practices are most commonly in the form of meditation, although mindfulness is just one aspect of adhering to the Eightfold Path, and it needs to be practiced consistently to achieve or maintain enlightenment. Mindfulness is applied to all facets of life, not just mental afflictions or ailments in the Eastern tradition. One way to describe Western mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Mindfulness spread throughout Western society and may be in the interpretation form of secular attitudinal quality or as the original Buddhist meditative practice. Western adoption of mindfulness as meditative practice has largely been implemented and researched in the area of therapeutic intervention and more recently applied to institutions. Kermeyer in 2015 suggested that mindfulness secularization in the West was to cater to the environmental influences and accessibility to a wider audience. The current research highlights the cultural differences between Eastern and Western mindfulness, describing the West as heterogeneous and a mostly secular practice. Buddhist long-term meditators have shown extensive benefits in areas of attention and emotional regulation, as well as body awareness. Additionally, structural changes have been found in the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and the amygdala, while also seeing some of the neural connections strengthening. Definitions of mindfulness meditation in the West are operationalized from intellectual knowledge and modernized self-report assessments. Much like any therapeutic technique, there are some gaps and limitations that must be considered. In the West, there are multiple definitions for mindfulness, and not having a consistent definition to operate from hurts the reliability and validity of mindfulness research. Western mindfulness interventions run the risk of reducing mindfulness's overall benefits from adopting a goal-directed approach to mindfulness meditation, which is usually seen to treat depression, anxiety, and addiction. Mindfulness in Buddhist tradition is adopted as a trait or characteristic that guides our thinking and behavior. Additional concerns here are for continual and also progressive benefits from mindfulness being affected by non-continuation of practice, post-intervention, or post-goal achievement. Mindfulness-based interventions are majorly still conducted in clinical health settings. More data is required to describe the phenomenological experience of continuous mindfulness meditation through more detailed qualitative measures such as diary entries, interviews, and focus groups. There are only small volumes of longitudinal studies of mindfulness examining the cumulative effects of consistent mindfulness. This poses large threat to the efficacy and replicability of the current research. The suggestion from Buddhist principles that in order to maintain the cessation of suffering, one must upkeep the practice of mindfulness in all facets of their life. From our gaps and limitations, our aims of the current research include to provide a further robust data surrounding mindfulness-based intervention by conducting a longitudinal study, to see if mindfulness-based interventions have a long-term yield, similar to self-reported and neuroscientific data of long-term Buddhist meditators, and also conducted a multicultural panel of participants, particularly utilising an Australian population as it is an ethnically diverse population. The study will aim to provide further insight regarding application of mindfulness on individuals with different cultural origins, potentially culturally blended individuals. The current research design will be a longitudinal randomized control trial. The experiment will be broken down into steps shown on the slide. The current research will be recruiting adult Australians with an all-gender inclusion. The only exclusion criteria is that they can't have received any mindfulness-based intervention prior to the study. Some of the materials being used in this research is the MBSR program developed by Kyprianos, but an abridged 7-week version. Some self-report measures regarding demographic details, compliance of mindfulness meditation, psychological well-being scale, and the 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire. These will be administered to be completed online. Some brain imaging will be used as well. Some MRI images will be collected at the multiple time points allocated. Also, informed consent will be given to participants and an information sheet will be provided surrounding the conduction of the research. Participants are to be recruited through social media and then randomized via a computer program and allocated into intervention and control group. Once being allocated, baseline tests in psychological well-being and 5-facet mindfulness questionnaire will be entered online, with the initial MRI scans collected. The 7-week abridged version of Kyprianos' MBSR program will commence. To keep on top of the students' compliance, an online measure will be reporting frequency and duration of home meditation sessions. Also, post-intervention, additional booster sessions will be provided. Follow-up years will provide also another sample of data from each time point. Further analysis of self-report data will be analyzed through intention to treat sample using latent growth curve models. Also, brain images will be reviewed and compare results with previous studies of long-term meditators to reference any significant changes in the brain structurally. The current proposal hypothesizes then that mindfulness-based interventions show significant benefits in the long term. The results of this research hope to produce a clearer view on outcomes for long-term meditators. If successful, the study may provide insight into MBI's applicability to a wider audience of differing cultural backgrounds. Also, some insight may be provided on how to transform mindfulness as a technique into a trait, aka dispositional mindfulness. Thank you.